Hey, what up, guys? So we are discussing what's next for Sergey Kovalev, the once again three-time now WBO light heavyweight champion. On February 2nd, he main evented an ESPN card when he challenged Eleider Alvarez in a rematch from their August 2018 bout, in which Alvarez scored an upset seventh-round knockout over Kovalev in one of the biggest upsets of the year. And, going into this fight, there was a lot of people that said that Kovalev was he was past it and he was gonna lose again. He was gonna get knocked out again. But I was in the minority because I actually picked Kovalev to win the rematch. I felt he was doing very well in the first fight before he got knocked out. He just left himself open, got caught with a good punch against a good fighter. In the rematch, he completely outboxed him. He did not stay away. He actually was engaging Alvarez, but Alvarez was looking for one punch at a time, trying to score that knockout again. Every time he landed a good shot, Kovalev just threw combinations, threw jabs, and boxed. And I was very impressed with his performance as he became a three-time light heavyweight champion. So the question is, what's next for Sergey Kovalev? Well, Kovalev is the biggest name in the division still. And he also looks vulnerable to a lot of fighters in this division. Sad to say, but that's true. So I think a lot of these guys will go after the money to try to get Kovalev in the ring. Now let's take a look at some of his options. First, let's take a look at the options from the weight lower. There's two guys talking his name right now. Callum Smith, the number one fighter at 168, the WBA super champion. This guy has talked about possibly moving up and fighting Kovalev. He's a tall 168-pounder. I'd like to see it, and I like Kovalev's chances in this fight. I really do. Smith's not a big, heavy-handed fighter. He had a nice knockout over George Groves, but he's not a big, heavy-handed fighter. And I'm not sure if he could really hurt Kovalev. So I really would be interested in watching him fight, but he is kind of young. He's fresh. He's undefeated. So I would love to see him and Kovalev go at it. So that's a good option. But Callum Smith is with the zone. So I don't know how that would be worked out between Eddie Hearn and Kovalev fighting on ESPN now. There's also Gilberto Ramirez mentioned Kovalev's name. Ramirez is supposed to be coming back in April or May. He's the WBO super middleweight champ. So he would probably move straight into a world title fight if he wanted to give up his belt. They're talking about Ramirez moving up, getting an interim fight at 175 light heavyweight. And if he can't land a unification, giving up his belt at super middleweight, staying at light heavy, and possibly facing Kovalev by the end of the year. So this is a real possibility here, and I like it. I really do like this fight. And I love Kovalev's chances in this because I think Ramirez is a little bit overrated. Excuse me. I would love to see this fight go down. So that's another option. Jesus, I'm very sorry, guys. My throat right now. Okay, so next up, Alexander Usyk, Gavots, the undefeated WBC champion. I would love to see this unification bout. I really would. But I think Kovalev is going to try to take on guys with who are a little bit more established. Votsick had a big upset, impressive knockout win over Adonis Stevenson, and he poses a threat. So I think Kovalev's going to, even though he wants to unify belts, I think he's going to allow this one. I think this is going to be his last option. And I'm not sure this fight goes down this year unless, Votsick kind of looks vulnerable in his next fight. I really think Kovalev has better options, more beatable options that are better known, that he can make more money off of too. And I think he's at that age to where he's going to be picky and only trying to unify belts with Votsick if he has to. So that's another one. The next option is a rematch with Eleider Alvarez. I don't see it. I don't think he needs to do this. I think he'd be taking a risk against him. He really proved in the first fight that he was outworking Alvarez, and he was on his way to probably a decision win, possibly a late stoppage in the first fight before he got caught. I really do think it was a major upset and it was a legitimate win, but I really think he proved in the rematch that he's the better fighter. And unless he just purely wanted to go for a knockout against Alvarez in the third fight, so interesting. But Alvarez he doesn't have a big name, and he's not bringing a world title to the table to unify belts. So it'd be just kind of a risk, and I don't think he needs that fight. So there's that. And guys, I'm reading off pretty much all the guys in the top 10, top 5, top 10, his best options. Okay, so the next guy is Marcus Brown, who's actually in line to challenge one of the other champs right now, Dimitri Bivol. He also fights on the PBC, so I don't think this fight's there. I don't think this fight's got any legs to it. I don't think the PBC would be opposed to sending Marcus Brown over to ESPN to fight Kovalev, but I don't think Kovalev wants to take this fight. But you never know. It is an option. He did have a nice win over Badou Jack in January, did Marcus Brown. Next up is WBA champion Dimitri Bivol. I don't see this fight happening. I think Bivol, to tell you the truth, if he beats Joe Smith Jr. in March, which he should, I personally think Bivol's going to probably move down to 168 because he can compete there and probably dominate there. And there's not a lot of options at 175 with him now being with DAZN and pretty much everybody else being with either PBC or ESPN in Top Rank. So I don't see this one, even though I'd love to see the fight happen, I don't see this one being a possibility right now. Next up, obviously Badou Jack's not an option. It shouldn't be right now. Artur Beterbiev, the IBF champion. I think this fight does have some legs towards the end of the year. Beterbiev's going to come back, take on a lesser opponent in his next fight, likely in May. And then if he gets a big win there, I wouldn't be surprised. These two guys don't like each other from their amateur days. And I think Kovalev really wants to face Beterbiev before anybody else to unify belts. So, yeah, I think this fight could happen towards the end of the year, but definitely not next. And then pretty much the last guy I want to talk about is Sullivan Barrera, because I think he's the most real option for Kovalev. That this fight is being talked about because the Barrera-Beterbiev fight fell through. They're talking about Sullivan Barrera being the guy to challenge Kovalev likely in June. I think this fight is probably going to happen because right now I think they want to set up big fights, and they got to do that by getting all these guys to fight, interim fights and look good on ESPN and then send them all against each other. So, yeah, I think this fight is the most likely to happen for Kovalev next. And it's a good matchup. Barrera can box and he can take punches. And I think it's a very good matchup. And I think Barrera would have a good chance of pulling out the upset. But Kovalev, he's rolling. He's a world champ again. And anything's possible at his age. He could lose and he could take over and be that classy veteran with power that makes a difference. So we just got to wait and see. But I love this guy. I really do. I've been a fan of Kovalev since 2013 when he broke out. I've watched pretty much every one of his fights since then. And, yeah, I'll still say it to this day. He beat Andre Ward in that first fight. I don't care what anybody says. He beat Andre Ward in that first fight. So that's it, guys. And I will come back with, I think, Gervonta Davis or one of those guys next. I got to look at the next big main event. But that'll be next on my list. All right, guys. Have a good one. Bye. True Boxing out. You've been hit.